Offensive tackles, quarterbacks, they're all under the spotlight in week 3 of preseason camp at Nebraska. We talk about it next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the fall sports season begins to get going. FanDuel is hooking up all customers throughout the summer and into the fall with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
All right. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday morning. Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone in Omaha and Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. We are just dragging our way through camp at this point. We have officially reached the point August 13th now where you're struggling. I mean, the countdown is on. All eyes are focused on the calendar now as we try and get toward August 31st. There's still a couple key questions left to answer for Nebraska, and we'll tell you what are on our minds here in this question or in this segment in this podcast. First things first, I want to discuss this. You posed an interesting one on our little rundown here today. I don't know that I've given this much thought since the start of camp or really even the summer. When do you think is a target for announcing the starting quarterback for game 1 for Nebraska?
It's a great question. It's one that that Kevin Suits and I got into somewhat when you were out producing a child a couple of weeks ago, or more accurately, your wife was.
Yeah.
I think we can go about this in a little bit different way than Kevin and I did on that podcast, because that was several days ago, and now we've had a little more to digest. There's been a scrimmage. Matt Rhule came out with his comments after the scrimmage on Saturday. I didn't think he was particularly full of praise about anything that the offense had going on. He just seemed like he was stuck in that, like, where's the light at the end of the tunnel moment on camp. He said the Huskers were moving out of the dorms a little earlier than last year. So for the first time in August, I felt like they were kind of struggling a little bit to get through every day. And for me, that shed some light on where they're at. Do they need a quarterback announcement to kind of spice this thing up, to kind of give it some life here in the middle of August? I think that would get people going. That would get players excited. That would, or you know, it would. Yeah, I mean, I think they would be generally excited to know that Dylan Raiola officially is going to be the guy in week 1. I think it's coming sooner rather than later. So let's say sometime next week. They're not going to wait all the way to game week.
I was definitely under the impression that we were like, I just kind of thought that it was gonna, and there wasn't going to be any sort of, fanfare surrounding the announcement. It's just going to be like, yeah, I think we're going to start Dylan in the first week. That's kind of how I've approached it this entire offseason. It's an interesting point you make about them almost. Now, I don't know if like they're in a place where they need to have this announcement to kind of, to get things moving in the right direction. Like, I don't know that I'd necessarily put it that way.
Not in the right direction. I think they could use a boost. They could use a shot in the arm.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. Right. I don't know. That's an interesting way to put it, though. And it definitely does do that. Like, if you were to announce your freshman starting quarterback, he has arrived, and there's some sort of a video or something like that, and it's him saying, let's go, or, whatever it might be. Like, I think that would provide quite the boost. I think you're right about that. So I wonder how that's going to get approached over the next week or so here. There's still almost 3 weeks until the first game at this point. So we'll see what happens.
Could they do it next week in the Chasing 3 documentary? Like, could we all find out on YouTube as that thing premieres in whatever, the 4th week of camp here around like August 20th.
That would be a way to do it. That's for, man. now you got the gears turning a little bit. I don't know. I kind of feel like that would be the type of thing that would happen. I mean, think about it. It would happen in a closed door meeting. And the only time we get to look at the closed door meetings is during the Chasing 3 documentary. And it's like, hey, the entire team's there. I got one more thing before we're going to start today's practice. You're starting quarterback, and then, the whole thing, and everybody gets a nice little jolt because that happens. And then we find out about it, the next day when the documentary comes out. Interesting. I love it. I love the idea.
It's kind of dramatic, and in that sense, it goes a little bit against the way I think Rhule has handled this QB thing the whole time since Dylan signed in December. But I also think it's somewhat in line with the way that they'd like to use that method of communication. I mean, he's not above breaking news via their own channels. Like we saw what they did this week with the little speech to the team during the open to the public, not scrimmage, but practice. And as we discussed in Monday's episode, Matt Rhule didn't put those 62 seconds out there for the world to see without fully understanding that people were going to be talking about it the next day. And hey, on Monday, that's what people were talking about. A lot of people were talking about what Matt Rhule had to say to the team at that Saturday scrimmage. So it might have to be a quick turnaround because these things usually take about a week to turn around. So some advanced planning would be necessary. I'm not sure. I put the odds at that. We're going to get some odds in the next next segment. I put the odds at that at maybe like 8-1. More likely that he comes out 5-1. Maybe more likely that he comes out on like a Saturday, one of the next 2 Saturdays, and just says, "Yeah, we're ready to make this announcement. Here you go, guys. Dylan has earned the job."
I still think they want to be careful, though, like just to poke holes in it. I still think they want to be really careful with anointing him anything, and I think they want to be really aware and conscious of Heinrich Haarberg too, and that entire thing. Like everybody else, I mean, we've been talking about it for months. Like we know that Dylan Raiola is going to be the starting quarterback, so I'm sure that Heinrich can see the writing on the wall. But I think they want to be conscious about that as well, and have that plan really, have Heinrich's plan really laid out for him before they make any sort of public announcement. It's kind of touchy. It's kind of tricky. So like, I think there's that piece of it to it where if you unroll it with all this fanfare and there's a video and there's a graphic and there's a big parade or whatever that follows it, that might not make everybody feel great.
That's a little bit deflating for your returning starter, your guy who won all 5 of your games at that position last year. I agree. I thought in his comments on Saturday after the scrimmage, when he did talk about the quarterbacks, and he said that there were a few turnovers that happened in situations that he wouldn't like to see. And he talked about how the big thing that he needs from his quarterbacks is for them to learn how to handle things when they're not going right, that the freshmen have never been in situations where things are going wrong and they have to walk through the fire. And Rhule said Heinrich has been through the fire. It felt to me like he was kind of fighting himself a little bit. Rhule was like, I know I got to do this. I know what the choice is. I know what the right thing for the team is. But, Heinrich's been there. He's been in these battles, and coming out of the scrimmage, maybe Heinrich had a good day. But at the end of all of this, like, you go with the most talented guy, the guy who gives you the best chance to win, even if there's a steeper learning curve along the way.
Yeah, really interesting. So we'll see how that's because, like I said, I think like it's delicate. It's at the very least a little bit delicate when you think about those two guys, and I think you're right. Like deep down in his heart, like he really, really appreciates Heinrich Haarberg.
Oh yeah,
this guy won us some games last year, and he's improved greatly, and he's a great locker room guy, and he does his job, and he does what's asked of him, and it just so happens that they got a better guy. They recruited over him with a better guy, but it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for them. So it's really interesting to see how they've done it so far and how they will do it in the coming weeks here.
The other thing I want to get to before we get back in after the break and talk some more about quarterbacks and Dylan Raiola is what's going on for Nebraska at offensive tackle coming into this week of practice and how they're going to handle Turner Corcoran at that left tackle spot. So Turner is the guy now with Teddy Prohaska out for the season with an injury that he suffered a week ago Monday. And Teddy didn't practice all of last week. He was finally cleared to practice before the scrimmage on Saturday, and Nebraska decided to sit him out of the scrimmage, not have him make his return to the practice field in a full contact environment. So they eased him in. Presumably he was back out on the field Monday, and then today, Tuesday, going through the week, he'll be there and then scrimmage this Saturday. I wonder, how do you think you handle someone who has 30 plus starts? I think 31 starts is Turner's number at Nebraska. He doesn't need scrimmaging necessarily, but he's got to be fresh and ready to go. It's a fine line to walk, I think, on how to get him ready, but also make sure that he stays healthy.
Well, I think you really side on the, the load management side. It also, it does another thing too, which it prepares. We talk about the depth and the lack of it at tackle, both tackle spots now, just tackles in general. It prepares some of those other guys working with the first group, for going into the game, working against Nebraska's defense, Big Ten caliber defense. Like, get those guys in there as much as you can. Make sure Turner is totally ready to go before you get the season started here, and you have to try and really load manage those guys. But yeah, I wouldn't be concerned about him getting more reps. That's for sure. He's like you said, he's had the most reps basically of any Nebraska football player who's ever lived. He's had a lot of reps. He's started a lot of games for Nebraska. So yeah, I'm not really worried about him getting fresh for the season.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's probably the direction they're going to go. And you may see him out there for some of the scrimmage. Well, we won't see it, but he may be out there for some of the scrimmage this week. But I do think they're going to want to get Gunnar Gatula and Grant Segrin, those two in particular, ready to go for the season in case they're needed, because you may need them. You may need them against Colorado. They may get thrown in there. Talk about getting thrown into the fire with like a quarterback. If you got to send Segrin or Gatula out there to play left tackle against a Big 12 team, that's thrown into the fire. So, all right, when we come back after the break, we've got some more discussion about the quarterback spot. We're going to go around the league, talk about Big Ten quarterbacks and where Dylan Raiola may fit among that group. That is next.
All right, it's Tapper here for the FanDuel Sportsbook. As the summer now starts to wind down, Mitch and I's attention is fixated on the American League Central, or maybe the American League wildcard race, as the Royals try to gear up for the playoffs. You can take advantage of what you think is going to happen on a nightly basis with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So you place a wager on an upcoming Royals game or whatever else you'd like to that's on the board. You win it, and it's $150 in bonus bets. And then you could really get creative with your money. Then you could join in on that American League MVP odds or World Series odds, whatever you might want to do on the FanDuel Sportsbook. It's all there for you. And of course, there's preseason lines on the NFL and college football as well. Get signed up, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Use that code, use that link there, and make all your shots count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Okay, welcome back on this Tuesday. I'm Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone in Omaha is with me. We will hear from some of the Nebraska football contingent after the 12th practice of camp here on Tuesday later in the day. We'll get to some of that later in the show to preview what may or may not be said and how that impacts this camp. As a reminder, support FanDuel, as Connor just said, but I want to mention this right now. I saw some odds posted from betonline.ag on Monday for passing yardage leaders this season in every Power 4 league nationally. Connor, did you take a look at this? Did you see any of this as it pertains to the Big Ten? Because if nothing else, it gives you a little bit of a reminder that there's 18 quarterbacks, 18 teams to remember here in the Big Ten this season. And you can at least see who's projected to start for all of them.
Well, it's interesting as we'll get into the odds here in just a second, but we'll tell you that the top 4 guys in terms of odds are all from the West Coast schools, from the new schools. So you have Dylan Gabriel is basically a 1-to-1. Miller Moss, USC starting quarterback 3-1. Will Rogers, Washington starting quarterbacks 8-1. Ethan Garbers, UCLA 9-1. So those are all the new Big Ten schools, and they're the top 4 quarterbacks. No surprise. The Big Ten. We've talked about this before on the podcast, Mitch. Like it doesn't produce great quarterbacks. It's not a secret to anybody. I did this research project not that long ago, just a few weeks ago. So we're talking about 3,000. How would you categorize a 3,000 yard season for a starting college football quarterback? Like that's a pretty good.
I think that's really good. Yeah, in a 13 game season, that's really good. That's 250 plus yards per game.
So that has only happened. Only 21 people have done that in the Big Ten since 2014. Since the start of the 2014 season. So, and a whole bunch of them have done it twice. Tulia Tungavailoa has done it 3 times, and he is, now out of the league. And there's only, there was 2 that did it last year. There was 3 that did it the year before that. It's not a high octane offense league.
Did Adrian Martinez ever do that?
Adrian Martinez did not, but he was a big, total yards guy. I think I want to say he had like 2,800 or so in his freshman year, got close, and then never close.
His true freshman year was his most prolific. Yes.
Yeah. So it's not a high octane league. You can look all the way down the list, and Nebraska's starting quarterbacks obviously did not even come close in this regard last year. Dylan Raiola, who is the assumed Nebraska quarterback and certainly the Nebraska quarterback, is listed on these odds at 50-1 toward the bottom of the league, along with the likes of Luke Altmaier from Illinois, Maryland's quarterback, both of Maryland's quarterbacks, Ethan Kaliakmanis from Rutgers, formerly of Minnesota, and then the aforementioned on this podcast, Cade McNamara, who clearly has some work to do before he thinks about leading the league in passing. So he's quite a ways down there. Is there a little inefficiency here that we can explore, Mitch?
So Dylan's 50-1, and the Wisconsin quarterbacks, Braden Locke and Tyler Van Dyke, are both listed at 20-1. And Hudson Card from Purdue has some experience and he's thrown for some yardage, but Aiden Childs, Michigan State, 33-1. Alex Orji, Michigan, 33-1. I don't think Dylan Raiola is going to lead the Big Ten in passing yardage, but I'm not sure that I would rank him below several of those in the 20s and 30s to 1 that I'm seeing on this list. So maybe some of the national expectation is lagging a bit on Dylan Raiola. Did you see the comments on the Pardon My Take pod from Matthew Stafford about young Dylan?
He's a bit biased.
He was asked about his favorite player, his favorite teammate in all of his NFL years, and he called out Dominic Raiola, the only name that he mentioned, and then got into a shout out to Dylan. Said his son is a stud, is a great player, and so he's on Matthew Stafford's radar, which I guess we probably knew even after Dylan spurned Matthew Stafford's alma mater, Georgia, last year in the winter. But maybe not on the radar as much nationally, at least with some of these odds makers, as you might expect for a 5-star who's coming into a program running a pro-style offense. I don't know. Nebraska didn't throw for a lot of yards last year. True freshmen don't generally lead the Big Ten in passing, so I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't think just because they have Dylan Raiola for Nebraska to be all of a sudden become this explosive offense. With that being said, they're going to be in a position to. What was that? Was your cash register just go off?
Yeah, sorry, just drop something on the ground. It's only my wedding ring. Don't worry about it.
It sounded like somebody came to the cash register and said, "Open the cash register door."
Yeah, I got no better answer. I was like, what can I say that was? Like a quarter? It was my phone. No, just playing with my ring here and it just fell on the ground. Luckily, there's not a vent or anything like that beneath me.
Okay, so Nebraska's offense is not going to be like this high octane, whatever. He's not going to throw for 4,000 yards this coming year. I'll be curious to see where it lands, because I think we talked about this before too, Mitch. Like, I kind of think Nebraska is going to be doing some passing to set up the run this year. I think they're going to have some trust in their pass game a little bit. So I wonder where it'll land. The last time a Nebraska quarterback had over 3,000 passing yards was Tanner Lee in 2017, the cursed year. He had over 3,100 yards that year. And then before that, Tommy Armstrong did it just over the mark in 2015. So
I'm cool with it. I think, I'm cool with it. I think it makes sense to make him a heavy underdog to lead the league in passing yardage. I just find it humorous or interesting, some of the quarterbacks that are listed ahead of him. Just as we get out of here in this segment and get it back into some more Nebraska camp talk to preview what's happening Tuesday in Lincoln, I'll say the ACC favorite is Cam Ward of Miami, 2-1. The Big 12 favorite is Shedeur Sanders of Colorado at 3-1. And the SEC favorite is Carson Beck of Georgia at 3-2. And then Quinn Ewers just behind him from Texas at 2-1. So those are probably some of your Heisman favorites right there, along with Dylan Gabriel, the even money favorite from Oregon to lead the Big Ten in his first year of Big Ten play.
He's not going to lead the league, but I guess I would, we could put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised if we were talking about him at the end of this year, if people were talking about him at the end of this year of he's a guy that, is going to be toward the top of the league next year. He might be the best.
Dylan?
Yes, Raiola.
Yeah.
He might be like the guy that shows up on the list next year of preseason all Big Ten, or whatever it might be.
Start the hype train now. I mean, let's get the Raiola 2025 Heisman campaign off the tracks here in August of 24.
Yep, that's how it usually goes anyway. Okay, third segment coming back. We have a few things that we'll get to, including a look ahead at Tuesday's practice on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. But first, want to remind you about the Locked On College Football podcast, and of course, pass along a thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On College Football podcast. Plenty of previews for the season. Off-season stuff is in there as well. The topical college football stuff with Spencer McLaughlin. Locked On College Football, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Passion, drive, and patience. That is the winning formula to win championships, and also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights. So whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride, just as they say, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
All right, welcome back. Final segment here on a Tuesday. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you. We'll still have another full week of podcasts here as we get ready to go for the season. After Tuesday's practice in Lincoln, Nebraska will roll out linebackers coach Rob Dvorak. That's a position, Mitch. We can, kind of take this for a second. That's a position that we don't really talk about that much. And I was thinking about it a little bit earlier today. It's not a position that we don't talk about very much because they have all this depth and we feel like they're going to be really, really good. it's just a position that we don't talk about very much. It's kind of interesting how it sets up at linebacker.
In the way that the defense is built this year, they're kind of mashed between the headliners. Like the secondary has got Tommy Hill and Isaac Gifford and Marquise Buford, all returning starters. Buford's been a multi-year starter, was hurt most of last season, but then came back to start at the end of the year. Big things expected from him this season. Gifford's a team leader. Tommy Hill's maybe the most athletic, like freaky kind of guy on the team. He was on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. So, and the defensive line, of course, has got Hutmaker and Ty Robinson, Jamari Butler. The linebackers, it's like, okay, I think they're going to get the job done. Like Rob Dvorak's a very capable young coach. He really only coaches two positions, which is interesting in its own way. After today, after Tuesday, we will have heard from all 10 of the full-time assistant coaches at Nebraska, and it's only August 13th. So I do want to say in that context, a shout out to Keith Mann and his staff, and also to Matt Rhule for making that decision that almost no other program does in America.
Yeah.
And the fans are the beneficiary of that because all of these coaches get heard. Rhule wants them to have practice doing media sessions so they can advance their career opportunities, in many cases to leave Nebraska, so then he can promote from within. It's possible, Connor, I think before camp ends, that we're going to hear from some of the new assistant coaches who have been elevated to advanced roles here with the NCAA legislation. We might hear from Jack Potenza, who aptly coaches the Jack linebackers. We could hear from Ron Brown coaching the kick and punt returners, maybe Aaron Coling, the assistant O-line coach, or Rashawn Melvin, who played for Rhule in Carolina and is helping under John Butler and Tony White coach the corners. But on Tuesday, it's going to be Dvorak.
Well, it breaks up the monotony. I mean, we were just kind of talking about like the countdown of the season. There's kind of a calendar, like a schedule in your brain. It's like, yeah, we've heard from these coaches a couple times. There's nothing more to ask. So we've asked them about all of their position battles and all of their young guys, and we've covered everything. So it'll be good to maybe hear from a couple other people before the season gets started. That'll be nice.
What's most on your mind when it comes to Dvorak's guys? I mean, he coaches the Mike and the Will linebackers. So this is like Nick Henrich and Luke Reimer's position last year. John Bullock and Javen Wright were also mixed in there. Like give me a question. What's something I can ask him today?
Ask him about Stephon Thompson.
Yeah.
That's a name that we just like. I haven't heard anything about him. They transfer from Syracuse. I'm really curious about him and whether it's, depth that he's adding to that position or like what they feel like they have in him there.
More experience. He has more experience in the 3-3-5 than anybody on this roster, which is odd to think about, but he played for Tony White at Syracuse for multiple years. And then they stayed with the 3-3-5 last year at Syracuse after White left, and Stephon Thompson was there for that. So, things kind of ran their course for him. It was an odd way to end because he was strong as a freshman, and then he went downhill a little bit with his production. And he didn't light the world on fire when he got to Nebraska. Like, he wasn't somebody that people were talking about in spring football. But I think slowly and kind of under the radar, like this position has shown itself to be, Stephon Thompson is working his way into a spot where he's going to be in the rotation. So I was somewhat surprised to hear Rhule on Saturday in talking about these linebackers mention that they want to have 3 ready to play, because last year it was 4. And there were some injuries that the top guys were dealing with, but he wants to have 3 for sure. And he said, if there's 4, that's great. So they've got the 2 returning semi-starters in Javen Wright and John Bullock. And then you have Mekhi Bayor, who played both inside and at the Jack last year. And then Thompson is the 4th guy right now. So they would also like to play Vincent Shavers and avoid a red shirt with him. So the thing to look for there, if Shavers is playing and there's not an injury that forced him to play above him, that means they really, really like what he can give them as like a 4th or 5th inside linebacker, because they're content to do it with 3 or 4 at most.
Interesting. You would just feel like that they if they all feel like they could, they would like to have more, at those spots where you're running and, you're calling stuff out and you're in the kind of middle there. But, look at the position with those two spots.
Like a quarterback of the defense.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
You play one quarterback. So I think on defense, like the middle linebacker, the inside linebacker is kind of that's the one defensive position where you can draw some parallels.
Yeah, I mean, you have Wright, who you feel good about. You have Bullock, who you feel good about, and Bayer, who steps into a more feature role after being a flash guy last year. And then Thompson out of the transfer portal. And then outside of that, like it really is, and not that it's a bad thing, but you really go down to, guys like Shavers, and younger guys who were recruited by Matt Rhule, who hopefully have made some progression over the last, year or so here, because it's like, for a position that we don't talk about very much, it is kind of awfully thin in those two spots.
It kind of is. I mean, they have Dylan Rogers, who's a redshirt freshman out of Texas that they feel has a ton of athleticism, and then Vince Genatone, the transfer from Montana, the North Platte kid, who is athletically gifted, but has work to do to get on the field. Like those are some of the next guys up at that position, and they're a ways down. They're a ways down the list. I mean, Shavers. I'm intrigued by that, and I'm intrigued to ask Dvorak about Shavers, because if he's really running like 4/5 and they want to play him, like what is it? Like what does he give them at that position? Where can they use him situationally, where he gives them something that the other guys don't? That must be what they see with him. Like maybe he's going to be able to generate turnovers because of his style of play, or get to the quarterback from an inside linebacker position on a blitz. Rob probably isn't going to be giving up the secrets on that here on this Tuesday in camp, but you can read into a little bit of what Rhule said, and I think project that.
Interesting. Oh, by the way, Mitch, I haven't asked you about this yet. Just a programming note. Are we planning on running it back on Friday with the post-practice analysis show again?
I'm cool with it. Yeah, I'm cool with it. I think that show got a good response last Friday when we did the live episode from campus. And as long as we get let into practice this week, which I think is the plan on Friday, they don't kick us out. They don't shut it down like Matt Rhule has wanted to do with the scrimmages on Saturday. Yes, let's do it. You good with that? You want to come?
Yeah.
You heading back down? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to be there anyway. It's my last day of paternity leave, so might as well be there.
All right. That's the plan. You guys heard it here first. We made the decision right here live during the show. So that's what you get with Locked On Nebraska.
All right. That's it for today. We will be back with you tomorrow. Still a couple more shows until Friday. Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast. Whatever college football topics are on the docket for the day, Spencer McLaughlin's got you covered. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description of this very show, so you don't even need to search. That's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.